Ready to dive deep? We're tackling Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning today.
We've got excerpts straight from the book and some background from his Wikipedia page.
Our mission: uncover the core of logotherapy and explore how Frankl's concentration camp experiences shaped his insights on finding meaning, even in the toughest situations. I think he pulls it off.
Oh, absolutely. Frankl's book, it's structured masterfully. He weaves his personal story in with the principles of logotherapy.
So like he takes you right into the heart of his concentration camp experience.
Raw and unfiltered.
Yeah.
Then uses that to build his theory in the second part.
Like he's saying, look, if I could find meaning in that abyss, imagine what you can find in your own life.
Right. And get this, he originally wanted to publish it anonymously.
Wow. Anonymously. Why?
He wanted the focus to be just on the message, not on him.
These ideas are bigger than me. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's jump into meaning. Frankl starts with a story about a life-altering decision. He had an immigration visa right before World War II broke out.
Huge decision. He had the chance to escape Austria and the Nazis.
But he was Jewish. So, especially dangerous for him, right?
Absolutely. And he was already working on his theories about meaning. America seemed like the ideal place to develop those ideas.
To be safe and keep working. Makes sense.
But then he finds a piece of marble from a destroyed synagogue. It was inscribed with the commandment, honor your father and mother.
Whoa, a sign.
It was. Family was everything to Frankl. He just couldn't abandon his parents, not with what was unfolding in Europe.
This story really shows how important meaning was to him, even before the camps.
It wasn't just an intellectual thing for him, it was deeply personal.
And that personal commitment to meaning became his lifeline in the camps, right?
Definitely. He noticed prisoners who held on to a sense of purpose were more likely to survive.
Even something small, like reuniting with loved ones or finishing a project.
Exactly. Having something to look forward to.
A reason to wake up each morning, even when surrounded by unimaginable suffering.
He wasn't saying to just pretend suffering doesn't exist, of course. It's about finding meaning in it, not despite it.
Didn't he find meaning by helping others while in the typhus ward?
He did. Putting his own needs aside, really lived his philosophy.
But for those of us who haven't faced, extreme situations like that, how does meaning play out in everyday life? Frankl talks about the existential vacuum. What's that?
Think of it as that feeling of emptiness, like something's missing. That lack of direction.
Yeah, I think we've all felt that at some point.
It can show up as boredom, depression, even aggression or addiction.
For I believe we all grapple with this existential vacuum.
To some degree, yeah.
Have you ever felt this void? How did you deal with it?
I think.
This is where Frankl's ideas get really interesting. He doesn't give easy answers, right?
No, he provides a framework for finding our own meaning.
And that leads us to logotherapy. So what is it exactly?
Logos means meaning in Greek.
So logotherapy is?
A therapy focused on our will to meaning, helping us discover and embrace what gives our lives purpose.
This seems so different from what we usually hear about happiness in psychology. Was Frankl saying pleasure isn't important?
He saw pleasure as a byproduct of meaning, not the goal.
So not like Freud and his focus on pleasure.
Right, or Adler with his focus on power.
Got it.
Frankl thought the main driving force in us is that desire to find meaning, to make sense of our existence.
To find that why, the thing that gets us out of bed in the morning.
Exactly.
But it's not just about having a purpose, is it? He also talks about new dynamics.
Oh, yeah, new dynamics. That's a good one.
What is it exactly?
Think of it as this creative tension inside of us. It's the push and pull between what we've achieved and what we still want to accomplish.
So we need that tension.
Like a rubber band. That stretch is what keeps us mentally healthy and engaged, striving towards something meaningful.
So it's not about the absence of tension, but about having the right kind of tension.
You got it. It's a much more dynamic view of mental health. It acknowledges our need to strive, to reach for something bigger than ourselves.
Makes sense. But Frankl didn't shy away from the difficult stuff either, right? He talked about pain, guilt, and death. The tragic triad.
Heavy hitters, unavoidable realities.
Things that can really shake us.
He believed even within these we can find meaning.
Wait, really?
He called it tragic optimism, the ability to hold on to hope and purpose even when facing suffering, guilt, or our own mortality.
How do we cultivate that? Tragic optimism. Can you give some examples of what Frankl meant?
Well, he believed suffering, for example, could be transformed into achievement.
Okay, interesting.
He saw guilt as an opportunity for change, a chance to learn from our mistakes and make amends.
And death.
Even death, the ultimate unknown, could be a source of meaning.
How so?
It reminds us that life is precious.
Yeah.
It motivates us to live fully in the present.
So it's about finding the silver lining, even in the darkest of clouds.
It's more than just finding a silver lining. It's about recognizing that even when facing these things, pain, guilt, death, there's still a choice to be made.
We can choose to succumb to despair.
Or we can choose to find meaning, to rise above our circumstances.
And find a reason to keep going.
Exactly. It's this choice,
Yeah.
that lies at the heart of logotherapy.
Not ignoring the tough stuff.
Right. He wasn't saying just pretend it's not there. He knew pain, guilt, death, they're universal.
But we can choose how we respond.
Exactly. That's where the will to meaning is so powerful. Remember, he saw this in the camps, those who held on to a purpose.
Even in the face of, well, everything.
They're more likely to survive.
That why it's like an inner compass,
Right.
Guiding them through. But how do we apply that to, everyday life?
Think about a time you felt lost, directionless, maybe a breakup, job loss.
Uncertainty.
Yeah. That's when Frankl's ideas can be really helpful.
Because even when everything feels like it's falling apart,
There's still a reason to keep going. Logotherapy is not about easy answers or avoiding pain.
it's about
Discovering what truly matters, what gives your life meaning, and then using that to move forward.
Frankl gives us some tools for this, right? Paradoxical intention and de-reflection. Can you explain those a bit more?
Sure. Paradoxical intention. It uses humor, kind of like reverse psychology.
To deal with anxieties.
Yeah. It's about intentionally trying to do the thing you're most afraid of.
So, like, if you're scared of public speaking.
You'd intentionally try to make a fool of yourself on stage.
Really?
It sounds crazy, but leaning into the fear, sometimes it breaks its hold on you. Frankl talks about a bookkeeper with writer's cramp.
What happened?
This guy was so anxious about writing, his hand would cramp up.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Frankl told him to try to write as badly as possible.
And
It worked. The cramp disappeared. He wasn't focused on the fear of messing up anymore.
wow, outsmarting your own anxiety. What about de-reflection?
De-reflection is about shifting your focus away from a problem, especially when you're overthinking.
Like obsessing.
Yeah. It's often used for things like sexual dysfunction or insomnia. Instead of dwelling on it, you redirect your attention outward.
To something more meaningful.
Exactly. Something engaging. Let's say you can't sleep.
Instead of staring at the clock.
You focus on reading a book or listening to music.
Makes sense.
By shifting your attention, you allow a more natural resolution to happen. Now, he wasn't saying ignore your problems,
Of course not.
but suffering is part of the human experience.
He understood that.
He also believed we have the power to choose how we respond.
Right. He saw meaning as something we can find even in the dark places.
Even with pain, guilt, and death,
And by embracing tragic optimism.
we can live more fulfilling lives.
One thing that struck me, Frankl's emphasis on responsibility. What did he mean by that?
He saw it as the flip side of freedom. True freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about realizing you have the power to choose your response.
So even when things are out of our control,
You still have a choice in how you react. And with that freedom comes the responsibility to make choices aligned with your values, your sense of purpose,
it extends beyond ourselves.
to our families, communities, even humanity as a whole.
We're not just individuals, we're part of something larger.
Exactly. Frankl thought by living meaningful lives, taking responsibility, we contribute to a more compassionate world.
You said earlier that Frankl pushed back against this idea that we're just products of our circumstances.
He knew biology, psychology, society, they all shape us. But he argued that we have the power to choose our response to those forces, self-determining. Within the limits of our circumstances, we decide who we'll be, how we'll act.
We're not just puppets.
Right. Even in the camps, Frankl saw a sliver of freedom, a choice point. He said, freedom to take a stand. Even when stripped of everything else, we can choose our attitude, our response to suffering.
And that's where we find our freedom, our meaning.
Exactly. He criticized what he called pandeterminism, this idea we're totally determined by external or internal factors.
It's easy to feel that way when things are tough.
That view can trap people, make them feel powerless.
Like victims.
Yeah. And that's where his psychiatric credo comes in.
Psychiatric credo. Sounds intense.
It's actually quite hopeful. It's his belief that even in severe mental illness, a spark of freedom remains.
So even someone struggling with a mental health condition.
They can still make choices. That's Frankl's view. He said recognizing this capacity for choice, even in the face of suffering or mental illness, that's what makes psychiatry meaningful, worthwhile.
If we don't believe in change, what's the point of trying to help?
Right. He wanted a humanized psychiatry, one that sees the person behind the illness.
A person who still has freedom and dignity.
Yes. Now, he wasn't downplaying mental illness or suffering.
He knew the challenges people face.
But he emphasized not reducing individuals to just their diagnoses or circumstances.
Seeing the whole person, their potential.
Their capacity for growth, even when facing adversity.
That's a really hopeful message.
It speaks to the resilience of the human spirit.
We're not just machines. We're victims. We are active agents in our own lives.
And we always have the power to choose our attitude, our response.
And it's in those choices, those acts of defiance, that we discover our true meaning and our humanity. Frankl's ideas really make you think about challenges differently. We've been talking about responsibility, even in tough situations.
He almost reframes suffering, as a chance to grow, a chance to find meaning.
To show courage, resilience.
Right.
And it all comes back to the will to meaning, right? That fundamental drive.
Absolutely. He thought this will to meaning. We find it in three main areas.
Which are?
Creative work, experiencing beauty and love, and then choosing our attitude when facing unavoidable suffering.
So it's not about, like, achieving huge things or having these amazing experiences.
Not necessarily. Meaning can be found in the everyday, simple things.
Okay.
Think about getting lost in a creative project. Painting, writing, gardening.
Even cooking.
Yeah. That feeling of flow, when you're totally absorbed, that's meaning-making.
It's like time just disappears.
Exactly. You're totally in the present moment.
And it's the same with beauty and love.
Right. Appreciating a sunset, connecting with someone you love, feeling awe in nature. These things, they nourish us, remind us what matter.
Savoring those moments.
Yeah, those connections that make life feel vibrant.
What about that third area, choosing our attitude when things are tough?
Frankl believed, even when we can't control what's happening, we can control how we respond.
He's not saying it's easy, though, right?
No, of course not. Finding meaning in pain takes strength. Frankl knew suffering could be incredibly hard, even unbearable sometimes.
Yeah.
But we have this power to choose how we relate to it.
To find that glimmer of hope.
Even in the darkest times. This is what he called tragic optimism, remember?
Right. Not denying the tragedy.
It's about finding a way to move forward. With courage, with dignity, recognizing that even in the face of pain, guilt, death, there's still a choice.
To give in to despair.
Or to find meaning. And in that choice, that act of defiance, that's where we discover our true freedom, our humanity.
That's powerful, challenging, but also incredibly hopeful. So where do we go from here? What does this all mean for us as we search for meaning in our own lives?
Frankl's work gives us a roadmap, principles, practices to guide us.
Okay.
He reminds us that meaning, it's not something out there in the world, it's something we create.
Within ourselves.
Yes, through our choices.
Yeah.
Actions, relationships.
It's about embracing the whole human experience, the good and the bad, and finding a way to make it meaningful to us.
It's about realizing we're not alone in this. We're all connected. And each of our journeys contributes to this larger human experience.
This has been an incredible look at Viktor Frankl's work. It's amazing how timeless and relevant his ideas are.
He shows us that even in a world that feels overwhelming, we still have the power to choose meaning, to find purpose, to live lives full of depth and connection.
I think Frankl would leave us with this question. What responsibility are you avoiding in your own life? What would it look like to step fully into your power, even when things are difficult?
A good question to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into man's search for meaning. We hope it's inspired you to continue your own exploration of meaning and purpose. Until next time.